Today is the 18th of July, 2019. We are at the New York State Military Museum in Saratoga Springs. My name is Wayne Clarke. Sir, for the record, would you please state your full name and date and place of birth, please?
Robert Kurcull, birthplace Schenectady, New York, September 5th, 1939.
And did you attend school in Schenectady?
Initially in Schenectady grade school, and then from there went to Loudonville grade school, and then Milne High School in Albany, New York. Graduating at high school in 1957.
And once you graduated, you went on to college?
4 years at Purdue University in West Lafayette, Indiana. And from there, Albany Medical College, graduating in June of 1965.
And you went directly into the service from there?
Yes. Once I graduated, we drove and I entered military service at El Paso, William Beaumont General Hospital.
Okay. And did you receive, obviously, a direct commission?
Yes, as a captain.
Okay. And what was your first duty assignment?
I was at the hospital in El Paso, at William Beaumont General Hospital. And then I got orders to go to Vietnam. Before going to Vietnam, we went to San Antonio for an additional 6 weeks of training before leaving for Vietnam.
And when did you actually leave for Vietnam?
In August of 1966.
And how did you get over there?
In a chartered Pan Am 707. Was able to fly over in civilian clothes.
Mm-hmm.
It was a very comfortable flight.
Well, whereabouts did you land?
Landed in Saigon.
Okay. And what was...
It was an interesting, because it was during the wartime, and they only would land in Saigon during daytime hours. They didn't want anybody landing at Saigon during the nighttime hours because they were afraid of attacks. But
Mm-hmm.
they came down and circling down and at a very steep rate of descent. I thought we were being attacked, and I remember, because the pilot said, "Don't be scared," because that's for
Mm-hmm.
everybody's safety, because they didn't want to fly over enemy. Everything was considered basically enemy territory outside of the environments
Mm-hmm.
of the airport.
And what was it like when you stepped off the plane?
It was hot and humid.
Mm-hmm.
Every day in Vietnam, because we were in the southern portion, 7 degrees north of the equator, it was like in the 90s in the daytime, and at nighttime the coolest it would be maybe 80 degrees or the high 70s, which was a thunderstorm.
Mm-hmm.
It was very hot and humid all the time.
Now, you landed in Saigon. Did you get any kind of in-country training or briefing before you were sent to your duty station?
Yes, for 1 week we were located in Saigon, a place called Copeland Compound, and we were attending meetings and briefings and what to expect, where we were going to be assigned to.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, they took us out to the airport, and we flew in a small Caribou, which the Army was utilizing for transportation at that time. And they flew me down to a place called Mito
Mm-hmm.
in the Mekong Delta.
Did you go down with any other personnel that would be with your unit, or you were?
As I recall, there were some other officers and enlisted men came with us, but
Mm-hmm.
they weren't in the medical field.
Okay.
They were probably administrative or had other assignments in our advisory team.
Okay. And what was that unit like when you got there? Were you intense? Were you in any kind of
The
ability?
advisory team had rented or was utilizing an old French seminary that was left over from the French days.
Mm-hmm.
So the seminary was a fairly substantial structure that had a good roof on it, so it wasn't like living in a tent. And we had electricity around the clock, and we had hot running water So we could take hot showers anytime. And the compound, though, was very small because over half of the advisors were out in what they call out in the field.
And that area was called Mito?
Yes, it was Mito,
Okay.
M-Y-T-H-O.
Okay.
South of Saigon, about 70, 80 kilometers.
All right. Now, do you want to talk about what your daily life was like on the compound? What?
Well, our primarily mission was to take care of all American civilians that were in our division tactical area. So that also included not only the Army, but the Navy and Air Force, and then civilian contractors and other government employees such as the CIA, USAID personnel, Just POW, and other spook agencies that sometimes we weren't even aware who they were, but anyway, they came in for medical treatment. And the other half of our time there was basically treating the Vietnamese. We would treat them at our compound, but mostly we treated them either at the local orphanage, at the province hospital, which was like a city hospital, or else in the remote areas, which were only available, or the only entryway to these remote areas was either by helicopter or by patrol boat in the Navy.
What about supplies and equipment? Were you well equipped? Did you have enough supplies?
For the American, for our American people, we had plenty of equipment, narcotics, morphine, IVs, bandages. We didn't have any trouble. The Vietnamese were always short of supplies. USAID was Agency for International Development, U.S. Agency for International Development, was supposed to supply the Vietnamese, but usually once it got offloaded at the docks in Saigon, once sent to the warehouses in Saigon, it never seemed to arrive, or like 10% would arrive of what was requested. So the hospitals were always in short supply, and the little medical dispensaries for the Vietnamese, they were always short of supplies. Probably half of it got stolen or got put on the black market for sale in Saigon.
Now, how secure was that compound?
Not very, because the perimeter was, we were only about 3 acres. We had some barbed wire, and at nighttime there'd be some security guards at the entry area to our compound, and in the back where there was a canal, and we had some security people up on the roof. But it wasn't like a regular Army base. We had layers of security. We didn't have much of anything.
How often did you get hit?
Once a month. Again, it was variable. Sometimes it was a false alarm. The alarms would go off, and the little military base next to us would be rocketed or mortared, which they were supposed to provide us with security, but they were not very dependable.
So you were hit with, when you were hit, combination of rockets and mortar fire?
Yes, small arms fire, because they used to attack us from the back of the little canal that ran behind our compound.
So ground attack also?
They actually never got into our compound.
Okay. Do you want to tell us about leaving the compound and going out into the Mekong area and the Delta? What that was like?
Yeah, there was a curfew, of course, at 10 o'clock. But generally in our area, if you had to go out, nobody was going to stop you. The only difficulty is if you left at the compound after 10 o'clock, there was no security to go with you. We didn't have enough MPs to go if we had to go down to the Navy base. So we left the compound after hours. They usually gave us a couple of hand grenades. I tell you, hope you didn't get ambushed, which we never did. But they had to drive through 5 kilometers of enemy territory to get into the town of Mito to get to the Navy base. But anytime you left the compound in the daytime, nothing was considered to be secure. There was a highway up into Saigon which you could take by convoy, but even then you could still get ambushed. But if you left to go anywhere further beyond our compound into the Mekong Delta, nothing was considered secure. Most of the roads anyhow had been mined, and all the bridges were pretty much out.
All right. You mentioned being out in the Delta area. What about treating different things like malaria, dengue fever, and was that any kind of issue with guys coming down with malaria being?
We didn't have much malaria in our area. Vietnamese, when we treated the Vietnamese, most of them were wounds, superficial wounds. And if we worked at the hospital, there were more serious wounds. But if you went out in these remote areas, there was only so much you could really do and carry with you. Basically bandages. We used to take out shell fragments under local anesthesia right in the middle of the street, what you could do. But these remote areas that we visited for several hours, there was not only no security, but you didn't have any cleanliness or anything. You just basically had a little table and a chair, and you did the best you could for all these war wounds. We set fractures sometimes too. But again, the follow-up was not very good, because if you put a cast on somebody who's going to, unless they can make it into a hospital, who's going to take care of it?
Right. Now you mentioned treating the Vietnamese civilian population. Were there ever any repercussions because of their dealings with the Americans, letting Americans treat or give them inoculations, etc.? We
didn't seem to have any trouble. Remember, I was there in the early years before the Tet Offensive. I was in and out before the Tet Offensive. And even though it was very, insecure area, we had a good relationship with the Vietnamese.
How many doctors worked with you?
None.
Oh, you were it.
That was it.
Okay.
Yeah, we had 26 medics. It's like, say, I was there in the early years. All the American hospitals, which was a whole separate type of a unit with the Army of Republic of Vietnam. When I was first there, all the Army hospitals were Saigon or north. Ultimately, before I left, they brought the 9th Division, brought down the 3rd Surgical Hospital. But prior to the arrival of the 3rd Surgical Hospital, I was the only doctor in that division tactical area that we covered. So there were 3 advisory teams in the Mekong Delta, each had a doctor. But there were no other military facilities in the Mekong Delta prior to 1967.
And how often did you get into Saigon?
Maybe once a month. We always went by convoy to get supplies. Sometimes I went to the airport. People would send us supplies, and we'd have to go to Thompson to pick it up at the, whatever, I can't remember the name of the facility. But I do remember one thing. One time we went to the wrong side of the base, and to prevent us from going all the way around, he called the tower and said they wanted approval so I could cut across the runway after 2 F-4s took off, and they let me go. They let me do that, which I thought was, very risky. But nonetheless, I was shocked to hear we could drive across active runways in the war zone instead of going all the way around. But to go all the way around, it would have taken us an hour.
Now, what about food? Did you exist on a lot of sea rations, or did you have a
in the
mess
field
hall?
doing medcap supply, we had sea rations. But if we were in the headquarters compound, we had hot American food at every meal, including breakfast.
Oh, okay. All right, pretty decent food for the area.
Oh yeah, for being in a war zone, it was pretty
Yeah.
decent.
Yeah.
It was hot food. Even even at breakfast time, you could have ham and eggs and
Mhm.
grits or whatever else they would give you.
Mhm.
Orange juice. We had good food if you're in the regular Americans didn't like us because the advisors got a lot of perks, which the regular Americans didn't have.
Mhm.
We got cost of living allowance, like I say, we had air-conditioned quarters for the dispensary, electricity around the clock. One thing that people don't realize either, we had Vietnamese waitresses at the evening meals. They would come around with a little sheet of paper and you'd check off which one and they'd come
Oh,
back and
okay.
get you the food. And that was for both the enlisted and for the
Mhm.
officers.
Oh, nice. Now, did you have movies at night too, or did you have an officers club at
Well,
all?
once
or-
the kitchen closed, they converted it to like a big auditorium, and they did have movies.
Mhm.
They were usually first-run movies from Hollywood.
Mhm.
The only thing ironic about that is a lot of times they used to send us war pictures, and I thought it was just, unusual to send us war movies in the middle of a war zone. I remember they used to send us that series of combat with, I don't remember who it was, the
Oh.
actor, Vic Morrow.
Vic Morrow, yeah.
It was sort of unusual, the movie, they'd hang a white sheet, and then sometimes there was an alarm go off, there was maybe an attack coming, and all the alarms would ring, and they'd shut the movie off, and then they'd restart it an hour later.
Mhm. Now, what about USO shows?
They would come through our area.
Uh-huh.
We had a variety of people come through. I remember we had Nancy Sinatra come through, Ephraim Zimbalist, Sunset Strip.
Yeah.
A lot of smaller shows, little troops
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
volunteered their time. But usually we never had Bob Hope come because people like Bob Hope would go to the big bases
Mhm.
because where he could, put a show on for
Yeah.
10, 20,000 people.
That was pretty cool to see Ephraim Zimbalist Jr. and
Chuck
James
Connors.
Garner,
Yeah,
Chuck
James
Connors.
Garner, yeah,
Yeah.
Chuck Connors. Yeah, sometimes we got some very prominent people, but
Mhm.
I know Martha Ray came through one time too.
Oh, okay.
Nancy Sinatra.
Yeah. Did they entertain at all, or just
A lot of
there
times
from
we just sit
around?
and talk for a couple hours, depends on if they're going to stay overnight or not.
Mhm.
Nancy Sinatra was part of a show. Ephraim Zimbalist just talked. He didn't do it. I remember he was in the officers club.
Yeah. Did you get an R&R when you were over there?
The advisors got 2 R&Rs. That was another sticking point with the regular Army people. I got to Hong Kong and I got to Malaysia,
Okay.
Kuala Lumpur.
Mhm.
Advisory teams had an awful lot of special perks, like I say, which the regular Army people did not like us.
Mhm.
But that was left over from the old days when it was part of the attached to the embassy, when it used to be MAG. It used to be Military Assistant Advisory Group. That's what I say, we had hot food, we had waitresses, we had
Mhm.
cost of living allowance, we had facility was well equipped, although it was very small.
Mhm. Were you able to call home at all from over there?
Communications was terrible. You couldn't even
Mhm.
barely call Saigon.
Mhm.
Into the Delta, I didn't think, I didn't understand why it was so poor, but you had a hard time even calling to Saigon. If you wanted to call the United States, you could go to the Pacific telephone in Saigon and try to get a call through, but that was
Mhm.
usually impossible. You had to wait an hour and you couldn't sit around because you had to get back to the checkpoint to get in the convoy to get back.
Mhm. And you mentioned you had a Jeep over there, but it actually belonged to the Navy?
Well, at one time it was the Navy, but then the Navy turned over all their
I see.
military equipment
Mhm.
because the Navy would provide support for the Army in the early years, back in the early 60s. So then the Navy just
Mhm.
transferred it over to the Army, even though it still had a Navy marking on it.
Okay. When did you actually leave Vietnam?
August of 1967,
August of 67.
which was before the Tet Offensive.
Right. Did you, before, well, you spent a year over there, did you notice like a buildup of more enemy action? Or did things pretty much stay the same?
Well, they always told us that the enemy was very active underground, but
Mm-hmm.
it didn't seem like there was much change for the year I was there until, of course, the Tet Offensive. They were probably, during 67,
Mm-hmm.
surreptitiously, bringing military supplies down the Ho Chi Minh Trail and bringing it into the Delta, but they didn't really do any unusual attacks on the bases in our area or in the Delta.
Mm-hmm. Did you ever have to treat any Viet Cong at all?
At the civilian hospital, we did.
Mhm.
Of course, they denied they were VC, but the Vietnamese said they were captured prisoners that had been wounded in
Okay.
an attack.
Mm-hmm.
But that didn't bother me any because it was just part of being a physician.
Mm-hmm. Now, your medical training, you finished college, you had some training briefly in the service, then you were sent to Vietnam. Do you feel you were adequately prepared to deal with wounds like gunshot wounds? Or
Well, anything major we always sent to Saigon because we didn't have a hospital.
Mm-hmm.
Just had a dispensary. But peripheral, superficial wounds, we didn't have any trouble treating locally.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes some of the special forces people, we had a special forces up in the Cambodian border.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes they would stop through to get treated, depends on where they were headed to.
Mm-hmm.
But usually they were just, fragment wounds
Mm-hmm.
into the extremities. Anything serious in the chest or abdomen would end up in 3rd Field Hospital or the 17th Field Hospital in Saigon.
Did you do much traveling by helicopter?
That was basically our way to get around to these
Mhm.
various little subsector areas.
Mm-hmm.
It was by helicopter. We made arrangements and we'd fly into a certain area to do a civic action program. Sometimes we did it for some inspections to see what was going on in some of these remote areas.
Mm-hmm.
They needed any help. And we usually, either the helicopter would wait for us because we didn't stay on the ground that long, an hour or two, or else they'd have to come back in 3 or 4 hours and pick us up and bring us back to Mito. Sometimes we had no trouble really getting around. If I had to go to Canto or Vinh Long for something, you would just walk into the operations shack and say, I need a ride back to Mito. They'd always find somebody, even
Mm-hmm.
divert a CIA Air America plane for you. So we rarely got stuck overnight. Sometimes we get stuck overnight, but it was only a few times.
Mhm.
Usually, everybody was very helpful.
Mm-hmm.
And they tried to help you get back before darkness.
Did you fly on mostly Hueys?
Hueys, and if it was Air America, usually it was a Porter, sometimes a little Dornier, little fixed-wing Dornier.
Okay.
Porter was one of those airplanes that they flew in Laos a lot with the big flaps. They could land in 50
Oh,
feet.
short field.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
The Porters could land probably in 150 feet, realistically. They'd
Wow.
come down and land.
Any close calls while you were over there, flying, etc., or incoming?
I went on an airstrike once, and then the close calls when the compound got attacked. But
Mm-hmm.
we were in a fairly secure place within the seminary. We had like 3 concrete walls before a round could get through to our compound.
Okay.
So it was the outside wall, and there was an inside wall and another inside wall. Plus we were sandbagged to 4 feet.
Mm-hmm.
So if you were on the first floor or the ground floor, you were told not to stand up because some of the Americans got killed during one of the attacks, had stood up, and the machine gun fire would go over the sandbag,
Oh.
so you
Yeah.
had to crouch down, 4 feet or below.
Mm-hmm. Any other incidents or any your experiences you'd like to add that we haven't covered? Anything that
When
comes
they
to
sunk
mind?
the Jamaica Bay, that was a big incident in our area. That was in January 67, when they were dredging for the American base.
Mhm.
We took care of those casualties. There's a couple of American contractors that were killed.
Do you want to tell us the background of that, what had happened?
Well, when I first arrived, they decided to build a big American base in the Mekong Delta, next about 6 kilometers upriver from where our headquarters compound was. So they brought in a big construction outfit, RMK,
Mhm.
and they brought a big dredge in, the world's 3rd largest dredge, I believe it was, from Columbia, New Jersey, and Jamaica Bay. And they started to dredge probably October of 66. And in January of 67, in the middle of the night, the VC were able to, the VC frogmen, so they said, were able to put some mines on the hull of the Jamaica Bay, and sunk the dredge in the middle of the Mekong. As a result of that event, they beefed up security at the dredge site. But it was mostly advisors that were out there with the Vietnamese, and half the Vietnamese, I think, were probably very sympathetic toward the VC, so that wasn't a very safe place to go at nighttime until the 9th Division arrived in probably March of 67.
Okay. Anything else you'd like to touch on?
Not unless you have any questions.
Okay. Once you were discharged, once you left Vietnam, whereabouts did you go for your
From there,
discharge?
I ended up 1 year at Fort Dix.
Oh,
That
okay.
was after I left Vietnam, and then after I left Fort Dix, then I went to Syracuse in New York City and did some training. But like I say, once I left Vietnam, it was to Fort Dix for
Okay.
about 8-9 months.
Now, what did you do at Fort Dix?
Treated the recruits,
Mhm.
medical treatment for the recruits.
Okay.
It wasn't very pleasant because at that time, a lot of the people that were recruited didn't want to be in the service.
Oh, yeah.
Because that was or about the time of the, Tet Offensive, before and after the Tet Offensive.
Mhm.
At that time, there were all those people marching in Washington and whatnot, didn't want to get drafted, because the draft was still in place, I think, until 69, when they instituted the lottery.
Okay. And where were you actually discharged from?
Fort Dix.
Fort Dix, okay. And did you go immediately, did you take any time off, or did you go right back to work once you
Maybe
got out of the
maybe it was
service?
a couple of weeks, but
Mhm.
I was discharged in June of 67, so we started additional training in July 1st of 68.
Mhm. Okay. Did you stay in contact with anybody that you were in service with?
Yeah, Sam Kemper, who was my first sergeant, stayed in contact with him until he died a few years ago.
Mhm.
He was a good first sergeant for the medical team that we had.
Mhm. Did you attend any sort of reunions at all?
No,
No. Did you join any veterans organizations?
I belonged to the local VFW here in Saratoga.
Okay. How do you think your time in the service changed or affected your life?
Certainly, you can see why people shouldn't be going to war.
Mhm.
There's a lot of sadness and a lot of trauma, but it seems like the government is interested in this military-industrial complex to keep that going. But we need the security in this country. You can see what happened in 9/11.
Mhm.
So you have to have a military force available for you, so that's why they of course, it's all volunteers now, which is, in my time, there was, the draft is still in place.
Sure. All right, well, thank you so much for your interview.
You're welcome. I can shut the machine off,
Let
right?
me see if I can zoom in on that.
I could get the other one too with the Jeep.
Yeah.
That was at Doncom.
Okay.
That was at the dredge site on the pipeline.
It's not too clear, but that's you on the right-hand side. And that fellow that's next to you, he
He was the
looks...
lieutenant in charge of the construction,
Okay,
Navy Lieutenant Lyons.
okay. And where's the one with you by the Jeep?
All right, shut that off. That's a place called Mekong. That's at a civic action program in the middle of enemy territory. When he went in and out was by helicopter. Down here, it got down
Yep,
there.
okay. All right,
That's the civic action program.
okay.
Captured equipment, captured VC stuff, right down here.
Right there, you're holding a mortar round. All right, got it.
Flipping through it, there we go. Right there.
You and James Garner, right there, okay.
He already died a couple of years ago.
Yeah,
Hard to believe that he was Korean War, wasn't he?
yep. Okay, thank you. Let's see if I can, I'm probably gonna get too much glare off the screen. Maybe if I can back up a little and zoom in. Oh, that's better. That's you with the Jeep.
Yeah, Navy Chief.
Okay,
I got the Navy numbers on it, but I was at the Army, right?
right. All right, I got it. Thanks again, sir.